Welcome to another Low Budget Binge. I wanted to thank everybody who came out to C2E2 this week and stopped by my table at Artist Alley and chatted about horror and comic books. Thanks to all who picked up a copy of Pirouette, Grave Trancers, Jungle Book. The con was a lot of fun. I got to catch up with a lot of friends and meet some new ones. But now it's time to get back to reality, so let's take a look at some independent horror films. Let's start binging. Welcome back to ML Miller Frights. I'm ML Miller. Before we begin, please do me a favor and punch that like button down below. Share this video with all of your social media addicted pals. Click subscribe to this channel and ring that bell for notifications. Low Budget Binge is where we venture down the path less traveled and look at low budget, no budget, and sometimes international films that never get that top billing you see with the usual Hollywood fare. I'll indicate in the review down below where you can find these films along with their trailers. Here we go. Followers, aka Cassette, is new on demand from Terror Films. It's directed and written by Marcus Harben. YouTube influencer Jonty, played by Harry Jarvis, you know he's an influencer because he wears his hat all the way back to the back of his head like a complete douchebag, heads to college and rooms with a trio of students. Turns out their dorm room, which is the roomiest of dorm rooms I've ever seen, is haunted. It seems as if a ghost is trying to communicate with them or get them to leave or try to kill them, or maybe all three. When viewership of Jonty's channel goes through the roof, Jonty and his roommates go all in trying to prove there is life after death. It's all caught on camera. Points to followers for shooting for the stars. They really try to make it seem like Jonty's channel is the biggest thing since the Tide Pod Challenge, though the depictions of the other influencers reacting to Jonty's videos leave a lot to be desired in regards to acting and even common sense. If in fact Jonty and his crew were able to prove life exists after death, there would in fact be a lot of attention, but the film doesn't have the creative scope nor the budget to convey it in this movie. What you get here is your typical low-budget, low-confidence found footage film. Low budget because the effects are not the best, and neither is the acting, which is supposed to feel like the actors are not acting at all, but they all seem like they're reading lines. Low confidence because the movie breaks every law possible in terms of making things seem as authentic as possible, which should be the goal of every found footage horror movie. Music is added because the filmmakers don't have confidence that the audience will realize this is a serious or scary scene. Edits out of nowhere occur between different types of cameras. Cameras just happen to capture what needs to be captured at the right time. All of it makes the film feel staged, planned, and pre-programmed, aka fake, aka the opposite of what you're going for in a found footage film. I would rather they simply filmed this in a traditional manner since they go against everything that makes found footage anyway. I didn't hate this film, it just kind of exists. Films focusing on influencers always kill my interest, as all it does is show how addicted some are with fame. I'll give it to Followers. It does try to attempt to make a comment on the price of fame and those who strive for it above all else, but it didn't have the self-confidence to tell an unfiltered tale with no technical intervention. That's found footage. The best kind of found footage. It looks like the writer passed away before this film was released, and that makes me sad. Who knows? Maybe he would have used this film to learn from his mistakes and make a better movie next time. As is, Followers has some short moments that might cause a startle or two, but doesn't have enough creativity or gumption to try for authenticity. So why should you or I take the time to see it? Homestead is new streaming on Tubi. It's directed and written by Ehrland Hollingsworth. Former outlaw Robert, played by Brian Krause, has settled down with his beautiful wife Beth, played by Jamie Bernadette, and his two kids Irene, played by Betsy Sligg, and Brian, played by Kavan Tonaskia. But Robert's past has come back to haunt him, as the gang Robert used to rob banks with return and lay siege to his home, demanding dirty money they believe Robert has hidden inside. This leaves Robert and his family to fight for their lives against these bloodthirsty outlaws. Homestead kind of advertises itself as a horror western, but it's really just a hard-edged western film. I'm okay with that. Had this been a movie set in modern times, it would be considered a home invasion movie, and the violence is quite potent, so I think it definitely has horrific elements. Most horror westerns incorporate some kind of supernatural element, but this one doesn't really do that. Still, I found it to be a solid low-budget western, and we don't get enough decent westerns these days as is. Homestead has a solid cast to tell its story. Brian Krause is best known for Sleepwalkers, and maybe Return to the Blue Lagoon, or his stint on Charmed. But here he delivers a nice grizzled cowboy role as he tries to be a caring father and family man, though it's not exactly in his nature. It's a well-rounded character, and Krause is believable in it. Jamie Bernadette doesn't have a lot to work with here. She's the typical good-natured woman who feels hurt that Robert hasn't told her about his violent past. Still, she offers up a key role, but the real standout is little Betsy Sligg as Irene, Robert's tomboy daughter, who's a sure shot with a gun and as tough as her paw. This little girl is a badass and really shines as the character you want to see more of in this film. Sligg is confident in her delivery. She's the breakout star and steals every scene she's in. The rest of the cast are decent too, as each of the scallywags who lay siege on the home are made up of character actors who all look and act differently from each other. There are no generic black hats falling down in sequence as the good guys blast their six-shooters. They each have a character moment. They're not full characters on screen, but it really feels like they've all come up with their own backstory for their characters, even though they may or may not be able to show it all on camera. The action is pretty bloody and tactile as well. This is basically a defending what's yours style film, and the family does everything they can, punching, shooting, and scraping their way through towards survival against these cowboy-hatted monsters outside. I don't want to oversell this one. Its story is simple and been told before. The setting is minimal. The scope is pretty much doesn't range past one home and a family in danger for one long night. Still, it makes do with what it's got, and served as a competent low-budget time-waster of a Western flick. Seems like that's exactly what it's set out to be, and it works. Recommended if you're like me and miss the hard-edge Westerns of old. I was happy I got to see this one. Leave is new streaming on Shudder. It's directed by Alex Herron and written by Thomas Moldestad. Alicia von Rittenberg plays Hunter, a woman about to leave home for college, but before she does that, she decides to track down her birth mother. See, as a baby, Hunter was found in a cemetery wrapped in a black cloth with occult symbology on it and wearing an upside-down cross necklace. She's been investigating her heritage for years and has deduced that she may have been the daughter of the lead singer of a Norwegian death metal band who was touring in the area where she was found as a baby. So off to Norway Hunter goes, and once there she uncovers an age-old mystery about her heritage and a creepy ghost that keeps telling her to leave. I don't know about you, but I'm kind of sick of these horror movies telling me what to do. Leave is one of those hodgepodge movies that darts all over the map. I wish it would have settled on one or two of the concepts that arise during Hunter's journey, but instead it tries to cram in Norwegian death metal, a suspicious Christian family, a stalker, an attempted rape, a stranger in a strange land, a search for one's heritage, a weird smoky ghost, an abduction, sexual physical abuse of a child, and drugged out insanity into one movie. The story of a woman searching for her heritage is a winner, but the meandering way it goes about uncovering that heritage is simply a grab bag of bad things that most of the time have nothing to do with one another. I get it that writer Thomas Moldestad wanted to make Hunter's journey an arduous and unpredictable one, but the way he heaps on the misdirections left my head spinning. Hunter's search is the focal point, but she has to encounter so much in order to get to the truth, and is running around in so many directions it becomes pointless after a while. Alicia von Rittenberg is stunning and a talented actress. She's a strong lead, and it's probably because of that I was willing to endure the hamster wheel Hunter is put on in order to find her birth mother. That said, she can't carry the movie alone. When she first meets her supposed family, they immediately present themselves as if they are a cast in an Agatha Christie novel. Everyone, even the ladies, seem to be twirling their mustaches at Hunter when she arrives. It just feels so mundane when I was promised at the beginning that there would be some Norwegian black metal, yet there was only a tiny, tiny bit. Leave is moody and atmospheric at times, and it had a premise and initial mystery that sucked me in. It feels as if the filmmaker wanted to put together an old-school whodunit, which is fine, but those stories have a particular cadence and feel to them. When you introduce a ghost and Norwegian black metal, two very interesting elements that really go nowhere in the story, it makes for a disappointing time. I guess the promise of such lively and supernatural things proved disappointing when in the end, all Lee turns out to be is a detective story, with slight supernatural elements. The fact that interesting angles and story elements were used as surface-level decorations instead of the main parts of the story left me wanting for the story to go in directions that it never did. The story I got felt like it wanted to be some kind of girl with the dragon tattoo style tale, but the mystery never reaches that level of intrigue. Too bad, because a Norwegian black metal ghost story sounds like a great movie I'd love to see. Leave isn't that. The Lake is new on demand and digital download from Epic Pictures. It's going to be available on Blu-ray on May 16th. The Lake was directed by Lee Thongkham and Aqing and written by Lee Thongkham. In a small village in Thailand, the locals find themselves running for their lives when a large monster rises from the waters and runs amok. Amidst the chaos, one man is attacked by the creature and survives, leaving the man with a sort of psychic link with the rampaging monster. But when the creature is captured, the man realizes if the monster is hurt, he's hurt as well. Meanwhile, the mother of all monsters emerges in search of her little ones. Japan is known for some amazing kaiju cinema through the years, but this is Thailand's first giant monster movie ever, and it's a whole lot of fun. Comparisons are going to fly to South Korea's The Host, and they're well deserved, but The Lake is its own monster of a monster movie. And while The Host has a heart-wrenching story about the importance of family, The Lake has some solid themes as well. While I'm sure some of the weight of the religion and community might not make it through the cultural divide when Americans see The Lake, it doesn't take much to understand that these are very important aspects to the common Thai person. Seeing the police encouraging the community to go to the temple and pray and take refuge away from the giant monster is not really something you'd see in an American film. But it says something interesting about the belief systems and the power of religion in Thai culture. That's why I love these international horror films. It provides a window into another culture as to how a certain set of people react to the unknown. Though telling the rowdy public to go pray might be quite a laughable redirection for American culture, it lets you know that the temple is a very important aspect of this one. The Lake attempts to try to make this a fable with a strong moral message about responsibility towards the community and those who act selfishly. I don't know if that message was clearly communicated as it could have been, so the final moments which attempted to sell this moral kind of fell flat on me. Again, this might be a cultural thing, but the attempt at poignancy just didn't work for me. That said, I was truly impressed with the monster effects in The Lake, which boasts that only 40% of the effects of this film are CG. The rest is all practical, which I found to be pretty astounding. Watching the movie really does highlight the right way to do a lower budgeted movie and make it look like much more was spent on it. There are some really well-framed scenes of the monster wreaking havoc in the background that is slightly blurry, that suggests absolute mayhem without actually showing too much. Again, this is reminiscent of The Host, but while The Host utilized more CGI, The Lake is doing the same thing in frame with practical effects. This impressed me much, much more. There's a lot of quick cuts. There are some scenes where it looks good, but still looks like a bunch of puppeteers manipulating a giant monster mock-up. I loved that. As a kid, I would not only marvel at the effects, but I'd also try to puzzle out how the effects were made. CGI doesn't give you that. It was a pastime that was kind of ruined by CGI, which makes everything and anything possible. For me, it's more interesting seeing how the creature was brought to life practically, and this film is filled with many examples of movie magic. If you're like me and love well-done special effects, The Lake is going to be for you. The acting is decent here, though as usual, because I'm reading the subtitles of this foreign language film, it's harder for me to discern whether the acting is bad or not. Some of the action is very similar to the T-Rex Jeep attack scene in the first Jurassic Park, and other scenes from that franchise. Despite all of that, I had a blast with this one. The monster looks fantastic most of the time. While the quick edits obviously were used to cover up the seams of the practical stuff, it added to the intensity of The Lake. So maybe the overall message didn't resonate, but I still had fun watching this Thai kaiju a whole hell of a lot. Recommended for old schoolers who missed those good old days of practical effects and men in monster suits smashing through cardboard cities. Ennis Men is new in select theaters from Neon Films. It's directed and written by Mark Jenkin. A volunteer, played by Mary Woodvine, studies a rare flower on a secluded island while her grip on reality seems to be slipping away. Simple plot, could be fun. But Ennis Men, which translates to Stone Island, instead is another film following the trend of analog horror that seems to have taken horror's critical world by storm this year with Skinamarink and The Outwaters, but also causing a massive level of frustration in fans who feel like they haven't watched the same movie the critics lauded. Like those other two movies, expect long silent takes on nature, very little by way of plot or character, large attention to sound or lack thereof, and a rather intimate look at the feelings of dread, loneliness, otherness, and that sheer terror only one experiences alone in the middle of the night, enveloped by darkness. Like Skinamarink and The Outwaters, Ennis Men does capture those feelings well. You understand the banality of the volunteer's job as she repeats the same routine over and over again in the first 30 to 40 minutes. It digs the point in hip deep that this woman is dedicated to her job, but definitely not happy. As her mind begins to wander to what seems to be fantasies of having an affair with the boatman who brings her supplies every week, or memories of what seems to be her daughter, who may or may not have suffered some kind of accident, you get a sense of who she is as a character, even though the film never even bothers to give her a name. If Ennis Men does something right, it constructs these feelings and communicates them successfully to the audience. When she does experience odd hallucinogenic periods, they also feel genuine and give off an overall sense of unease. Feeling-wise, this one is successful, which in many ways is the same thing Skinamarink and The Outwaters did. This method of storytelling is the ultimate in show, don't tell storytelling, and I like it for that aspect alone. With all that out of the way, Ennis Men is dull as a sack of dirt. Literally, nothing happens. The volunteer wakes up, leaves her home, goes up a hill, checks to see if the lichens in the area are attaching themselves to a flower on the top of a hill, throws a rock into a deep hole, gazes into the ocean, looks at a big rock, and then returns to her little home to write "no change" in her notebook. Then she reads a book and goes to bed. That series of events is repeated almost, I'd say, 20 times in the movie. Sure, occasionally she believes she sees her daughter, or the boatman, or a priest, or a group of women singing, or some burly miners who I guess might have had something to do with the history of the island at some point, but basically the bulk of the movie is monotony. It communicates monotony well, too well, but just because you're trying to communicate a feeling of monotony doesn't mean you have to make your movie monotonous. This makes getting to the end an utter chore. Need some sleep? Ennis Men works better than a few shots of whiskey and a bottle of NyQuil. And while this one is labeled a horror movie, Ennis Men is more like a dream about going to work that you can't wake up from. There might be 1 or 2 minutes of moody and unsettling imagery. It's kind of like body horror because the parasite that attaches itself to the flowers seems to be attaching itself to the volunteer's stomach scar in some way, which I guess might symbolize a C-section and pairing the decaying flowers with some kind of feelings of motherly guilt. But I've gleaned more feelings of horror from watching Peppa Pig with my niece and nephew than I did with watching Ennis Men. So if Skinamarink enraged you and The Outwaters drove you to unhealthy levels of frustration, personally I liked Outwaters a whole lot more than Skinamarink, steer clear of Ennis Men. It's 2 slices of white bread with nothing in between, an air sandwich, made with the 2 ends of close to stale loaf. I do not like this new trend in horror. I'm not talking about critics gang-blowing art films and misleading the general public with glowing praise to go see a movie not made for general consumption. That's been going on forever. I'm talking about horror centered on a feeling rather than story. The imagery is transfixing and meditative, with the occasional emphasis on doom and gloom. But while I admire the look of this film, as it tries to emulate some kind of 70s Giallo film stock look, and even gives the volunteer a bright red and yellow slicker a la Don't Look Now or Alice Sweet Alice, it just doesn't feel like anything more than an ethereal experimental film. Ennis Men gets the feelings well, but fails to deliver on any substance whatsoever. HUESERA, the Bone Woman, is new on demand from XYZ Films. It's directed by Michelle Garza Cervera and written by Michelle Garza Cervera, Abia Castillo, and Patricio Saiz. HUESERA begins with good news. Valeria, played by Natalia Solian, and her husband Raul, played by Alfonso Dosal, find out that after seemingly trying for a while, they finally find out that they're going to have a baby. But soon after the pregnancy is confirmed, it's made clear that while Raul is over the moon about the news, Valeria has some reservations. She's got a lot of reservations. And not only does she not think she wants the baby, but she doesn't know if she really wants to be married either. Both her family and her former girlfriend Octavia, played by Mayara Batalla, are trying to be supportive, but they also have concerns about Valeria's mental health and well-being. Having seen her around children in the past and knowing her much more than Raul thinks he does. Valeria's aunt sees much more than that. It seems an ancient curse named HUESERA may be taking hold of Valeria's soul, which means horrible things for the baby. HUESERA, the Bone Woman, is a subtle horror film from Mexico that leans heavily on drama and psychology. It's about a woman attempting to find herself when everyone around her has differing understandings of who she is and what she wants. Those around her project their own wishes on Valeria, and Valeria, being confused and mentally and physically strained, allows this, making her ultimately unhappy and vulnerable to the dark forces of the evil spirit HUESERA. This seems like a case of prepartum or prenatal depression, where Valeria is miserable through her pregnancy, taking all kinds of risks and intentionally doing things to sabotage her relationship with Raul and the health of her baby. Valeria is often in some form of denial, forgetting she's pregnant and fantasizing about what it was like before she was tied to Raul in this relationship. I think in many ways, this film addresses issues that many women suffer during pregnancy, but are too afraid to say out loud, given that being pregnant is so often looked at as such a blessing to so many people. That said, while there are a lot of nightmares, hallucinations, and creepy things happening in the latter half of HUESERA, the bulk of the film leans heavily on drama. This is a serious film, rarely taking a moment for levity or even mild happiness. It's a film that's going to hit those with children the hardest because of the complex emotions at play. That said, many will nope out of this film by the halfway point because so much of it is just Valeria moping around and crying. The latter half has thrilling scenes with haunting imagery, such as mysterious shadow figures in the distance watching Valeria, some strange nightmares where Valeria's bones are being broken, and an especially gnarly mass of arms and legs that appears during the climax. But those moments are few and far between. For the most part, it's Valeria attempting to cope with the pregnancy and making very bad decisions along the way. This is an emotional roller coaster for Valeria, and actress Natalia Solian does a fantastic job of making her role sympathetic despite the self-destructive things she is doing. It helps that the dark feelings are given an entity to embody, namely the titular evil spirit, but still it's a testament to her performance that I never felt angry towards Valeria despite the horrifying things she is doing to herself and others. While the resolution of Valeria's problem may not be the most Hollywood of endings, it's the most logical given this situation. But I could understand how a lot of people might have some disdain towards the character and the film by the time the credits roll. HUESERA is not an easy movie to get through. It's often slow and methodically paced to embody the depression Valeria burdens all the way through. Those who don't mind experiencing the lives of others, no matter how soul-shattering that experience may be, would be the target audience for HUESERA. But steel yourself. This is some heavy, dramatic material that may evoke emotions you didn't know you had and may not feel comfortable embodying. HUESERA, the Bone Woman, is a highly effective dramatic horror reminiscent of the arduous, terrifying gut punch that I felt while watching Possession or Rosemary's Baby. Yeah, it can be that heavy.
You're doomed to live the life you're meant to be, stuck inside You're